All the indicators that we're seeing are that inflation is low and economic growth is solid. So that the only part of the data that's disappointing is that the jobs numbers have been a little bit lower over the last 3 or 4 months.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Liz Landers here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From an ICE raid at a New York food plant to a disappointing August jobs report that indicated a slowing economy. Let's jump right in. The August jobs report is out, and it's slim pickings for job seekers. The latest numbers reveal only 22,000 new jobs were added in August, down from July's mark of 79,000. For more on this, let's bring in Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen. She's joining us live now from our D.C. newsroom. Okay, Steph, within the last hour, these new jobs report numbers have come out. What is it telling us, and how is the president reacting to these details?
Hey, Liz, good morning. Well, this is a very dismal jobs report. This is not what we were expecting. The expectations were that 80,000 jobs were going to be added in August, which would have been on par with what was added in July. But 22,000 jobs added is a very low number. But it's also worth noting the Bureau of Labor Statistics made some revisions to June and July. June, negative job growth. In July, they revised it up a little bit. So combined, the June and July jobs month, we added 21,000 fewer jobs than previously reported. So these are multiple statistics in this monthly jobs report going down and showing that the jobs market is really, really slowing down. This is really a consequence, experts say, of, in part, the interest rates increases that were done back in 2022 and 2023, some lingering consequences from that, but it's also a consequence of the Trump administration policies, of the trade war, of changes in tariffs, that all of those things are having an impact on the economy. Now, the Federal Reserve is going to be looking at this jobs report as a key set of data as they look at considering cutting interest rates. That's something that the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell had indicated in Jackson Hole that could be coming in September. The Federal Reserve was going to be looking for what's called a soft job market, so more people looking for jobs than there are job openings available, and that's certainly what the numbers in this August jobs report show. So I think all eyes really, turn to the markets for what the initial reactions are. We don't have a reaction from President Trump just yet, but I'll of course be keeping my eyes on his Truth Social account to see if something comes out later this morning. But then a lot of people, I think, will be looking ahead to when the Federal Reserve meets later this month and seeing what they do with those interest rates, Liz.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the stock market is going to be opening here pretty soon. So we'll keep an eye on that when the markets start trading here in the U.S. And on a different topic, Capitol Hill is still abuzz after yesterday's contentious hearing with HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I know you were on Capitol Hill all day covering that. Are we expecting anything in the aftermath of the hearing, either from lawmakers or from Secretary Kennedy?
Well, there have been a number of calls for Secretary Kennedy to resign. All the Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee signed on to a letter calling for him to step aside. But I certainly didn't get any indications in the hearing room that Kennedy plans to step down. And we haven't seen any cues from the White House or President Trump that he plans on firing Secretary Kennedy. Of course, every executive serves at the pleasure of the president, so we could see the president step in, but right now he doesn't seem displeased with how Kennedy is leading the Department of Health and Human Services. But a key question is about leadership at the CDC. Kennedy was defending the firing of CDC Director Susan Menarez, who was fired less than 30 days after she started the job and was sworn in after previously going through a Senate confirmation. And so that was a line of questioning that a lot of senators just didn't quite understand and couldn't wrap their heads around, how Secretary Kennedy went from completely supporting her to firing her and pushing her out in less than a month. And that was something we saw even Republicans like Senator Tom Tillis really want answers for.
I don't see how you go over 4 weeks from a public health expert with unimpeachable scientific credentials, a longtime champion of MAHA values, caring and compassionate and brilliant microbiologist, and 4 weeks later, fire her because at least the public reports say because she refused to fire people that work for her.
Now, Kennedy did confirm in the hearing yesterday that he did ask Susan Menarez to fire some longtime scientists and public health experts at the CDC. That's been one of the reasons cited for why she was pushing back against Kennedy, and that Kennedy did confirm that. However, Kennedy rejected the claims that he asked Menarez to be a rubber stamp for upcoming or future vaccine recommendations or vaccine changes. That's something that Menarez has said was why she was in conflict with Kennedy and why she got fired. But Kennedy is saying that she is lying, telling senators yesterday multiple times that he did not ever ask her to be that rubber stamp for vaccine access. So a lot of questions about what's next for the CDC. There's a lot of top leadership positions that need to get confirmed, and President Trump and Secretary Kennedy will need to pick a new director for the CDC. There's an acting one in place right now, but whoever is nominated to be the next director of the CDC is going to have to go through Senate confirmation, same way that Menarez did, and that road is going to be a tough one after everything that has happened with senators feeling like Kennedy has reneged on promises that he made during his confirmation process, and then, of course, after these recent shakeups on the CDC. So whoever gets nominated for that role is likely going to have a rough and fiery road towards confirmation in the Senate.
Yeah, that's, I think, probably an understatement, but some very good context. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen live for us in the newsroom. Thank you so much for your reporting. And European countries supporting Ukraine's effort against Russia have committed to deploying troops to the country to help maintain security if and when a ceasefire is negotiated. Those countries, known as the Coalition of the Willing, made the announcement after meeting yesterday in Paris. This morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin said any foreign troops deployed to Ukraine before a peace agreement is signed would be considered, quote, legitimate targets by Russian forces. All of this comes as President Donald Trump's deadline for the Kremlin to begin peace talks with Ukraine has passed. He first hinted at it, and now apparently President Trump will in fact change the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. According to reports citing a White House official, the president plans to sign an executive order later today rebranding the department in an effort to project toughness. The Department of War was created in 1789, the same year that the U.S. Constitution took effect. It was renamed by law in 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
I'm John Matarese. Decorating your house for Halloween just got a bit scarier this year because of new tariffs, but there's still plenty of affordable options that we're going to show you.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. The Trump administration says it is doing away with a plan to require airlines to compensate stranded passengers if the carrier cancels or changes a flight. Under the proposed rule, compensation would have started at $200 for flights canceled or delayed due to mechanical problems or computer outages. That rate would have jumped as high as $775 for delays of 9 hours or more. The idea was proposed last December at the very end of former President Biden's administration. It would have made U.S. policy more aligned with airline consumer protections in Europe. An industry trade group representing some of the nation's largest carriers says it welcomes the administration's decision. And in sports, WNBA superstar Caitlin Clark is done for the rest of the season. The injured star will not return to the Indiana Fever because of the groin injury she suffered back in July. Clark played in just 13 games for her team before being sidelined. Last year's Rookie of the Year had never missed a game either in college or the WNBA until this setback. The Indiana Fever are still battling for a playoff spot with just 3 games remaining in the regular season.
If you're a fan of decorating your house for Halloween, beware. The spookiest thing this year may not be the witches and skeletons, but rather the price tag because of new tariffs on Chinese products. But the good news is there are still plenty of affordable options.
Here at Home Depot, the ogres are out. Chucky has a new friend.
Last year we had Chucky, and this year we've added his bride.
And Skelly, who started the giant creature craze, is bigger and better.
Skelly is back. He's over here standing tall at 12 feet tall.
But Home Depot's Katie Eliason admits some of these animatronics have gotten costly. Lifelike Chucky is $229, while Skelly with new LED eyes is $299. Stephanie Carls with Retail Me Not says retailers stocked shelves with Halloween items earlier this year.
Shoppers are making those smart moves before the prices jump or those shelves thin out.
She says that tariffs have had a big impact on the retail market for holiday items.
Over 85% of Halloween products are made in China.
And shoppers should expect to pay double on some Halloween items compared to last year.
A $19 kids costume last year could be around $39 in 2025.
In addition to shopping early, she says stack your savings, combining sale prices with promo codes and cashback deals. The good news, at Home Depot, you can still find traditional inflatables for under $40, while Bill and Sue Fields are rushing to beat the next round of price hikes.
We got the Grim Reaper and we got some gravestones.
And that way you don't waste your money. John Mattery's Scripps News Group.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
There are a lot of children, especially, that are, facing the reality that they might not see their parents anymore.
I'm Liz Landers in Washington with a look at the headlines this half hour. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says today's strike on a high-rise building in Gaza City is just the beginning. It's the latest attack in the Israeli army's preparation to take over the city and other Hamas strongholds. Israel has been mobilizing tens of thousands of reservists to the area for days. Israel's plan has led to opposition domestically and condemnation around the world.
A pair of Venezuelan fighter jets flew over the USS Jason Dunham in international waters in the Caribbean on Thursday, Pentagon officials said. The destroyer is part of a group of U.S. warships deployed to the area as part of a mission to target drug smuggling. The Pentagon called the incident highly provocative. And the latest maneuver by Venezuela comes days after the Trump administration ordered a strike on a speedboat that it alleges was carrying 11 drug smugglers from the Tren de Aragua gang. All on board the vessel were reportedly killed. And the U.S. State Department has issued sanctions against 3 Palestinian human rights groups. Among them is the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says all the groups have engaged in the illegitimate targeting of Israel. It comes after they asked the International Criminal Court to investigate and arrest Israeli leaders. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the country's former defense minister. South Korean officials are expressing concern and regret over a major immigration raid at a Hyundai plant in Georgia. The raid happened Thursday, and agents took nearly 500 people into custody. Many of them are Korean nationals.
The investigation resulted in the arrest of 475 individuals and is focused on ensuring accountability for those who violate the law and uphold the rule of law.
Of the 475, how many were Korean nationals? The Korean media are reporting as many as 300.
There was a majority of Korean nationals from the 475.
So far, no charges have been announced from Thursday's raid. We are also learning more about an ICE raid at a confectioner's plant near Syracuse, New York. There are reports of agents using police dogs and crowbars to get into the facility. Governor Kathy Hochul has condemned the raid. Scripps News national correspondent Katie Tubman joins us live from New York with more on the story. Katie, what's the latest?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, Andrew. Communities in New York have been left in distress after dozens of plant workers were detained by ICE and Border Patrol agents during raids in upstate New York Thursday. We're hearing and looking at one of those raids, which you just caught some video of, happening at a packaging plant in Cato, New York, and it was captured on video. Advocates and witnesses told Scripps News that agents forced their way into the building using crowbars. Now, here you can see in the video people exiting the building and walking single file and making their way toward a van marked Border Patrol. And we're told that that van was being used to block the exit so no one could get in or out. And we're also told that workers were locked inside and not allowed to use their phones, as well as being separated into two groups, one for citizens and permanent residents and the other for non-citizens. Advocates and witnesses we spoke to said that citizens were allowed to leave and told rather harshly to leave, but non-citizens, despite having legal work permits, were taken into custody. We spoke with one of those witnesses, Ana Mendez-Vasquez, and she took that video that was just shown on the screen there. And Mendez-Vasquez lives in the community and was at the scene for hours in Cato, and she told us that on the phone today while she was on the road that many of the detained workers have children. Here's what she told us.
It was very sad, contacting the families, making sure that the children had somewhere to stay, either with a legal guardian, maybe a partner that didn't work there, or a relative that could take care of them. There are a lot of children, especially, that are, facing the reality that they might not see their parents anymore.
Mendez-Vasquez told us that this community, which relies heavily on agriculture and plants like this one, has been bracing for these ICE raids, and that they've spoken to their employers who assured them that they would not allow ICE on the property without a warrant. Now, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, in a statement Thursday night, saying that she's outraged by the raids, which seized at least 40 adults, including parents of at least a dozen children at risk of returning from school to an empty house. She added that the raids didn't make New Yorkers feel safer, but instead shattered, quote, hardworking families who are simply trying to build a life here. We were also hearing that these raids are coming as the Trump administration has ramped up immigration enforcement, especially at work sites across the country. And so this hasn't been different from those. An ICE Homeland Security Investigation spokesperson in a statement said the raid was, quote, court-authorized enforcement actions, and declined to comment further on this specific ongoing criminal investigation at this time. Now, the plant's principal owner, Mark Schmidt, told the New York Times that all of his workers had legal documentation to work in the United States, and he even called the ICE operation, quote, overkill. I also spoke with the plant's general manager on the phone this morning, and he said the plant did not receive any prior notice that this raid was going to happen, and that the plant is open today and running. Andrew?
So, Katie, we're talking about this raid in New York. We also were just following up on a raid that happened at an automaker in Georgia. Just how common is it that these raids are happening at work sites?
They're increasingly common, Andrew, and they're a part of a strategy by the Trump administration when it comes to immigration enforcement and crackdown, looking for, quote unquote, the worst of the worst criminals, regardless of where they might be, at home, at school, or at work in these cases. And so these raids that happen in New York, upstate New York, were happening at the same time Thursday as Homeland Security Investigations carried out what it called its largest single site operation ever in Georgia at that Hyundai manufacturing site. And in the past few months alone, we've seen several raids, many raids across the country where hundreds of workers have been detained. And that's been including a meatpacking plant, a grocery store, and dairy farms across the country, as I said. Andrew?
All right, national correspondent Katia Tubman for us from New York. Katia, thanks. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has signed new legislation designed to protect campers. It's in response to that flooding which killed campers and counselors 2 months ago. One camper is still missing. The bill is designed to improve camp safety, address gaps in disaster preparedness, and streamline emergency response.
Senate Bill 1, the Heavens 27 Camp Safety Act, and House Bill 1, the Camper Act, instill enduring safety into youth camp operations. Together, they require a lot of things. I'll summarize just a few. They install and maintain emergency alert systems, train staff on evacuation routes and procedures, require them to develop emergency plans, require cabins to be located away from floodplains, require camps to be able to communicate with campers and staff during emergencies. They create a youth camp safety team, establish minimum camper to counselor ratios, mandate state inspections to ensure compliance with emergency procedures. I will also be signing today Senate Bill 3. This requires local governments in flood-prone areas to install outdoor siren and warning systems.
Well, Governor Abbott went on to say that state grants would be available to help local governments make those improvements at campsites around the state.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
Thousands of books used without permission to train an AI model. I'm Maura Barrett. Coming up, the major settlement Anthropic just agreed to and what it means for the future of AI.
And later,
I think all people, whether you are American, whether you are not, should look at the White House's response, and it tells you everything that you need to know.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Liz Landers here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
A major legal settlement today that could change how AI companies train their models. And it specifically has to do with Anthropic, which is a company that has gotten a lot of attention as of recently. Maura Barrett is with us. She's out in Denver and is reporting on this story. At least I think Maura's with us. There she is. Maura, what more can you tell us?
Andrew, Anthropic just in the last couple of minutes released the details about their settlement. They're agreeing to pay $1.5 billion to these authors that alleged both copyright and piracy issues. So the settlement is specifically around the piracy. And so in the sense of how the changes to the future of AI in training will definitely need to be made. Anthropic is a company that's usually really cautious about its development. But one lawyer I spoke to about this case described it as a, quote, unique combination of sophisticated and stupid.
AI startup Anthropic paying up $1.5 billion after being accused of copyright violations and piracy.
I believe this case will be known by its first name to law students for a long time.
Well-known authors Andrea Bartz, Charles Graeber, and Kirk Wallace Johnson sued the company over what their lawyer calls, quote, brazen infringement. They alleged, according to the complaint, that Anthropic downloaded known pirated versions of the works, made copies of them, and fed those pirated copies into its models to train them.
And they took over 7 million books. That's a lot of books.
Nouvelle Gonzalo specializes in corporate law, covering intellectual property and copyright.
Anthropic is arguing, no, this was a transformative work under copyright law. And transformative just means that the final product is completely different. But then the authors argue, but it was our work that created it.
The judge ultimately sided with Anthropic on the copyright issue, finding the company's usage counted as, quote, fair use and therefore was legal. But he also ruled that downloading them from a shadow library constituted piracy. Under U.S. copyright law, damages start at $750 per infringed work, meaning Anthropic could have faced more than $1 trillion in penalties.
Settlements don't technically set legal precedent, but can we expect to see this fair use argument used in future AI and copyright cases?
Absolutely. A lot of people want to make new law just for AI, but the old laws, they work in this case. This is just standard copyright violation of unlawful copying or buying pirated material.
Now, I just received a response to my request for a comment from Anthropic, and they said that they are committed to developing safe AI systems that help people and organizations extend their capabilities, advance scientific discovery, and solve complex problems. They went on to tell me that this settlement is to resolve disputed claims and is not an admission of wrongdoing or liability. And they emphasize that this does not indicate that anything was ruled against the copyright issue, as we laid out, but more so that there's a disagreement about how these works can be obtained. Now, there's a hearing set on Monday for a judge to approve the settlement. And meanwhile, Anthropic continues to face several copyright-related legal challenges. And one notable case involves a group of major record labels like Universal Music Group. So this isn't the end of this conversation for the company, Andrew.
Yeah, and more, if someone watching is a content creator, an author, a musician, is there anything people can do to make sure that their work is protected against AI companies going out and stealing it and training their technology?
It's an important question. Legal experts tell me that the most important step is to register your work so that it's officially protected. There's Google alerts you can set up and also specific software tools that can help track if someone is using your work without permission, and that's something you can do through your lawyer. But the bigger question is whether AI companies should start paying licensing fees or even royalties every time they use original material to train their models.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
The last time I took a day off, everybody said bad things happened to me. You know that, Seb? I took one day off. I didn't take it off. I was working. In fact, I was here. But I didn't do a news conference, and they said bad things happened to the president.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Liz Landers. Let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
We've been talking about this Department of War. So we won the First World War, we won the Second World War, we won everything before that and in between, and then we decided to go woke and we changed the name to Department of Defense. So we're going Department of War, and I'd like to ask our Secretary of War to say a few words. Pete Hegseth. I think it's a much more appropriate name, especially in light of where the world is right now. We have the strongest military in the world. We have the greatest equipment in the world. We have the greatest manufacturers of equipment by far. There's nobody to even compete. And you see that with this and so many other things. The Patriots are the best. Every element of the military, we make the best by far.
All right, well, you've been listening to President Donald Trump in the Oval Office signing a number of executive orders. One that we've been talking about is the name switch from the Department of Defense to the Department of War. We actually have some signs or some video of those signs being switched out. This is a process that could potentially cost thousands, millions, maybe even in the billions of dollars if they do in fact change out signs not only here around Washington, but across the country. That was just one piece of news from this. It does seem like there's some question as to whether or not you would need congressional approval for this ultimately to go through, but it doesn't seem like any signs that the White House is slowing down on that. We want to go out to Haley Bull. She's our White House correspondent and has been tracking all of that news, potential news, from the White House. Haley, we just heard from the president. What were some of your major takeaways?
Yeah, Andrew, a lot of news there. Number one being the president signing an order, as you mentioned, that paves the way for the Department of Defense to be renamed to the Department of War. President Trump indicating that this is something he had thought about for some time, calling it a quote-unquote attitude. And he acknowledged, as you mentioned, the question remaining of whether Congress needs to act on it to cement that. But when asked about the message it sends with this, the president saying it sends a message of victory and strength, tying it to his peace through strength approach, largely pushing back on the notion of how to square invoking the term war as he pursues peace deals. The president indicating he believes it's because of this message of strength that they have been able to secure some agreements. He also signed an executive order involving those taken hostage, and we are waiting to see the specific details of this action. But officials say It gives Secretary of State Marco Rubio the ability to take action against states that take Americans in much the same capacity it does for state sponsors of terrorism. The special envoy for hostage affairs, Adam Bowler, was standing next to the president, saying that the administration has returned 72 Americans. Notably, though, one group of hostages that has yet to be returned in full are those taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th. This is a negotiation that has been ongoing, efforts to negotiate between Israel and Hamas on this front. President Trump saying they are in, quote, deep negotiations with Hamas. And the president also signed another executive act, or rather bill, around privacy protections for the home buying process. Notably, White House officials also said this was President Trump's 200th executive action taken today with the renaming of the Department of Defense. And that is a fact that we saw the president and his aides there in the Oval Office really celebrate. And finally, Andrew, looking ahead to next year, when the U.S. hosts the G20 conference. This is a conference largely focused on the world's largest economies. The president announcing that that will be hosted in Miami. This all comes as a day that the administration got really what was a weaker than expected jobs report, as officials here, though, are blaming the Federal Reserve for not taking action to cut interest rates and touting what they call a pro-growth agenda, still pointing to positive indicators they see in the economy.
All right, Haley, on a busy day from the White House correspondent Haley Bull for us. Thank you for that update.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, from the raucous Senate committee hearing grilling RFK Jr. to mounting pressure surrounding the so-called Epstein files, it was yet another busy week in politics. We spoke to journalist Maritza Giorgio for her analysis during our weekly political roundup. That conversation after the break.
I was once bright, fun, outgoing, and kind. I loved people, and people genuinely enjoyed being around me. But after meeting Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, it felt like someone shut off the lights to my soul. Instead of pursuing my dream of going to law school after graduation, overcoming the terror and the trauma that was inflicted on me by these sex traffickers, overcoming that became my decades-long full-time career.
That was testimony from earlier this week from a victim, a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. And every Friday, we dive right into the week in politics with Grounded host Maritza Giorgio. And we just heard from Liz Stein. She is one of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. She spoke out on Capitol Hill this week, along with a number of other extremely courageous women, I would add. Maritza, I know the Epstein files were a big topic on your podcast as well. We've been covering it all week. It was a pretty powerful afternoon hearing from these women. Do you think that they are going to get what they want, which is the full release of these files?
Well, I don't know if anyone can actually predict that, Liz. What I think, though, is meaningful here is that these survivors have had enough, and we saw them take the microphone and really take control of almost all of the networks on Tuesday afternoon on Capitol Hill, because so much of this story has been about the files and the lawmakers and the cover-ups, but people are forgetting that we're talking about real women who suffered real abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And so for them to take the microphone back and say, this is our story, this isn't just a political talking point, I think it's really powerful. And remember, they're women now, they were kids. They were kids when this happened to them. We see the faces of some there publicly, but remember how many more are out there who we don't see because they haven't come forward yet. And they are also suffering as they watch all of this unfold. We can muddy the waters even more here, though, and drive more conspiracy theories around this whole Jeffrey Epstein story when we see things like this new video that is making the rounds. It was captured by James O'Keefe, a far-right political activist. One of his employees recorded the acting deputy chief of the Justice Department unit on hidden camera, and there are a lot of bombshells in that video. That person said the DOJ is going to redact Republican names from the Epstein files, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security prison to keep her mouth shut. Now, the person in question who was recorded, Joseph Schnitt, he said he didn't know he was being recorded. He said his comments were just based on media reports. And he said he met that reporter on a dating app Hinge. But that brings up a lot more questions, like why would somebody with the DOJ be talking about this with somebody they met on the dating app Hinge who said they were an au pair? So I think there's just a lot of muddy waters here, but we do need to remember that we are talking about real people, real survivors of horrific abuse. And, that should be the focus as we move forward.
Yeah, I do think that this press conference was really powerful this past week, and it did recenter some of these conversations. And I know that you had Representative Jasmine Crockett, who's from Texas. She was on your podcast, Grounded, and she had some interesting things to say about these Epstein files. Let's listen to that, and I want to talk with you on the other side.
I think all people, whether you are American, whether you are not, should look at the White House's response, and it tells you everything that you need to know. And the reason that I say whether you're American or not is because it was made very clear to us yesterday after our roundtable that this isn't just levels of corruption at the highest levels of the US government, but there is absolute implication in foreign governments as well.
What struck you about what Representative Crockett had to say there about Epstein?
Well, here's the deal. She's on the House Oversight Committee. She was part of these meetings earlier this week with some of the survivors. She didn't give anything away in our conversation, but oh my goodness, we talked at length, at least a half hour, about some of the things she heard that she was shocked by, stories she had never heard before. And as she just said in that soundbite that you played, how far this thing really goes. If that's shocking to somebody who has been on the Oversight Committee, I think that there's a lot more that people want to know and that they haven't heard yet about this whole investigation.
And I want to move on now to what we saw yesterday on Capitol Hill. It kind of took over the news cycle yesterday, candidly. The Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., faced tough questions, really from both sides of the aisle, over his vaccine policies, as well as his handling of the CDC. There are staff members from HHS and the CDC who are calling for his resignation now. We've seen Democrats also calling for his resignation for months at this point. What do you think happens here? Does he survive this? Is he going to have to step down?
Oh, I don't think any of us have any clue what's coming next in this saga. I do know that I'm watching the Republican members of Congress here, and it really comes down to them. You saw several Republican senators go after Kennedy in those hearings yesterday. Not only Bill Cassidy, who's a licensed physician, but you also saw John Barrasso of Wyoming, Tom Tillis, and then Senator Thune. He made a statement talking about all the work it takes to confirm the people that they confirm, the Senate confirms, and that Kennedy will have to answer some hard questions, after firing the CDC director after just a month on the job. And then yesterday in those hearings, calling her a liar in an op-ed she wrote yesterday. So I think that things are not looking great for him when you have some of the high-ranking Republican senators starting to ask these questions and saying that he's going to face more hard questions. Here's the deal, though, and this is something that several senators brought up yesterday. We're already seeing vaccine access be chipped away. And a lot of senators questioned Kennedy on this in that hearing yesterday. Secretary Kennedy says, no, that's not true. Anybody can get the COVID vaccine, the COVID booster. As Senator Warren pointed out, though, the accessibility depends on the recommendations. And I heard several anecdotes just yesterday here in Montana of people who went to their local pharmacy to try to get the COVID vaccine and they couldn't get it. They told that they were that the spring vaccines were already put in quarantine and they were told they can't give them out, that they didn't have the current ones. They didn't know when they would get them or if they would be available. So there's already a lot of confusion here. And we saw during COVID-19, this was not a partisan thing. People from all stripes went and got the COVID vaccine, especially as we go into the fall respiratory disease season. I think that a lot of these senators from all states, red and blue, are going to be hearing from their constituents if they're trying to go get vaccines that they've been routinely getting for years and suddenly they can't get them. The other thing I would point out, we had Dr. Michael Osterholm on our show last week, and he really talked about how much, the mRNA vaccine research funding, how much of a difference that's going to make going forward, not just for COVID-19, but things like cancer. So I think that this is one of those things, public health, that people are going to start paying attention to, especially because they're feeling it real time. This isn't something that's going to come a year or two from now. Like if they can't go get their vaccine today, they're going to say, what's going on?
Yeah, and also it's confusing because we don't see a comprehensive federal policy about vaccines now from the CDC, and we're seeing these individual states decide what they want for their own states, like Florida, like this Western coalition with California and some other states. So yeah, I think that this is probably confusing for folks as they're trying to follow along. One more topic for you, Maritza. We've been covering, and I was covering this yesterday, what appears to be a major shift for America's war on drugs. President Trump ordered the U.S. military to strike an alleged drug boat that was tied to a Venezuelan cartel, but there are still a lot of questions about the legality of this move. I mean, I wonder do people care about this? I saw Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, say yesterday that he was not going to get into the specifics of why the U.S. was given, why the U.S. had authority to do what they did.
Yeah, it's one of those big questions, Liz, and you know this story better than I do, I'm sure of that. But the deal is they have been employing this flood the zone strategy with so many, what we call bombshell, unprecedented headlines. And so I think a lot of the American people have tuned out. So when you hear, okay, the United States struck a boat that was carrying alleged gang members, well, that maybe doesn't sound like the most alarming thing that day to some people. But what I think of with this is Kilmar Abrego Garcia, right? And this man who was sent to the El Salvador prison without due process, without his day in court, and then all kinds of things were thrown at him and accusations like he was a member of MS-13, he had the tattoos, and he didn't have the tattoos, but it muddies the waters. And so I think a lot of the questions that are being raised here are valid questions. Well, how did you know that they were gang members? How did you know they were part of the drug cartel? How did you know, what's the evidence here? And those are a lot of the questions that we're hearing. Did you contact Congress like you're legally required to do? What was the legal authority used to justify this strike? Those are questions because, this was a boat of 11 people, but what could be coming next?
Maritza Giorgio, host of the podcast Grounded, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to see you.
Thanks, Liz.
And you can find her podcast on Blue Sky, Substack, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Liz Landers. Have a great Friday night and a fantastic weekend.